Welcome to RSAC Conference 2025. We're here recording from the CyberRisk TV studio at Marriott Marquis in San Francisco. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabri, and joining me for this interview is Braden Rogers, Chief Customer Officer at Island. Congratulations to Island for being nominated as Best Insider Threat Solution finalist in the 2025 SC Awards. Welcome.
Thank you, Adrian. It's good to be with you.
Good to be with you. I'll be honest, when I first heard about enterprise browsers, I thought, what's wrong with Google Chrome? You know, and I was kind of, anybody who watched my podcast, I was very skeptical about this category. And I'm in a lot of different communities with security leaders. And, for years now, hearing them rant and rave about all the great stuff that they can do with an enterprise browser, I just didn't have the imagination, I guess, to understand how important it is. Like once people started talking about, oh my God, dealing with contractors, so much easier now, right? Like some of these cases where it's going to be BYOD, they don't have any control over the contractor environment. Like they're coming in to write some code. It's a 6-month contract. They don't want to buy a machine for them, ship it to them, deal with all that stuff. I'm sure just one of many use cases, right?
Ton of it's funny, your reaction initially was not unlike a lot of others, maybe even myself when I first heard the idea for Joint Island, near the beginning of the company. And, then you start thinking, well, wait a minute, my users live there every day.
Yeah.
The relationship between my user and the app, the internet was designed to be the user goes to this app and works with it. And we suddenly, through my 25-year cybersecurity career, we shoved a bunch of junk between that relationship. Yeah. And I say junk, don't mean it disparagingly, but it's a lot of stuff, and many times we're doing things that are unnatural, like breaking open SSL traffic. I was a blue coat for years. That's an unnatural act. It's just, we just found a way to do it. And you can't truly get visibility over everything because some things you just can't effectively look into. So we would cut through traffic and do, a lot of artificial means. We said, look, well, why not the browser? Why the user's there? If we could reimagine the browser in the context of an application delivery platform, turn the browser, since everybody's consuming apps in it, what if it became the application delivery platform? Yeah, it's exactly what we arrived at when we invented the enterprise browser. Almost 5 years ago now at this point, which is kind of crazy. But I think that's the best part of it is when you think about it, your users in your environment, they've been trained to use browsers for 20 plus years. Yeah. Like your frontline worker knows how to use a browser like crazy. Your people coming straight out of college, that is the interface they've always known. Yeah. What if I put a familiar interface in front of the users and on the back end, build an application delivery platform that backs the whole thing up? And that's exactly what we did. And it's been a remarkable journey. And, but that reaction wasn't unlike many we got originally. And then 5-10 minutes in to actually seeing it and understanding it, light bulbs started going off. And it did for me when I first heard about it and many others as well.
Yeah, and to your point, amazing place to put security controls to get observability, visibility over what's going on, from the employee's perspective, but also because it is where employees spend most of their time, huge responsibility to not introduce too much friction, break that user experience, because the web browser is the user experience for maybe 90% of the work they do, right?
Indeed. And we're fortunate, the industry's fortunate that Chromium exists. Yeah. So it's a good foundation. It's a universal foundation by which everybody uses the same rendering code. Your consumer browsers, your enterprise browsers, at the end of the day, if you use that same rendering code, you don't break things. Use the same core mechanics for the extension ecosystem. So therefore, extensions just work the way they're supposed to work. Hey, you build in mechanics to govern the experience, to shepherd the user effectively through it. But at the end of the day, the best part is it doesn't break the experience. It takes advantage of it being familiar, and then we enhance it, obviously, with the capabilities to deliver apps with it.
Yeah, and it's interesting, talking about how many different use cases are here. The category you were nominated in, Insider Threat Solution, it's a very tough one. You mentioned Blue Coat. There's a lot of things that are very difficult to do on the wire, on the network side. And traditionally, we kind of viewed that as, this is maybe not the best we can do, like an agent on the device. EDR was kind of the next step there, gave you some observability, but not really any control, right? And I think that's really where the possibilities get very interesting here is the ability to enforce, to not only spot potential data exfiltration. I'm thinking is kind of a key use case here when talking about insider threats. somebody tries to upload a couple gigabytes to their Gmail or something like
Right.
that, or to a GitHub account or something like that. You're perfectly positioned to do some enforcement there as well, not just report an alert on it.
100%. There's a unique advantage to being in this position. We call it the last mile.
Mm-hmm.
It's truly the last mile. If you want to think of it, it's truly the edge.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be, take advantage of other things in the industry that use the word edge as well, but it is truly the edge of where the user's fingertips touch the actual application.
Yeah.
So by living at the presentation layer of the application, which is the mechanics of the browser, gives me a very unique physical position of control that I've never seen before. Very different from things that break and inspect in the network. At the end of the day, I can do certain things like maybe I need to redact certain data for certain audiences of users. Great physical position to be able to do so. Redact the data, right on the front end of the application. Maybe I want to govern how people interact with the data and create boundaries of control around the applications where, I'll let the user work freely across the corporate applications and then copy and paste data from Workday to ServiceNow to the internal apps and things like that, but not personal Gmail.
Mm-hmm.
But in the world that I would always work in the past, we would have to block personal Gmail, keep people from doing that. Well, what if in the world I work in now with the enterprise browser, I could just let the org freely adopt personal Gmail, personal chat GPT, and all this other stuff, and the corporate data just doesn't spill beyond the boundaries. It's a very unique control construct for data protection. And then obviously you may slice in some data loss prevention inside of that, but as you start as out of the construct, it's a much more simple construct to be able to protect the data in the applications as well.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. Like personally, I've tried to separate personal and work using different Chrome profiles before, and it's extremely difficult because it requires the cognitive load of me to think, is this personal or is this work I'm going to do right now? Okay, so I'm going to go to a different space. I'm going to open this, and it's not very fluid. It's not a very fluid way to work. So you're suggesting you can do that automatically,
100%.
just by, okay, well, they're going to personal Gmail, that's, you can categorize that automatically, right?
Right. And the best part about it is built into the experience. It's not bolted on. So it's very, we like to use the word ambient.
Yeah.
It's more like ambient security. At the end of the day, the user feels freedom and they bump into a boundary. They get gently either guided to the sanctioned environment. Maybe they try to go to Chat GPT or something. We've got a sanctioned AI environment we want them to go to. So because I control the browser's mechanics, I can gracefully glide them over to the sanctioned environment without the nature of just a traditional block page.
Yeah.
Prevents. We give them a wonderful experience in the process. And, at the end of the day, there's some things we may not want them to do. We may want someone in the business level making the decisions for us. So being able to tie into things like ticketing environments for automation of policy creation, and where a business level decision maker says, yeah, it's okay for Bob to have access to ChatGPT. It'll stay outside the application boundary, but just approve it right there in ServiceNow. And then the policy creation happens automatically. And at the end of the day, it cleans itself automatically up if you only want Bob to have access for 5 days. So, but letting business level engagement be a big part of this is really critical for the enterprise browser.
Yeah, and I've been referring to that as no but. I love this new idea in security that instead of just blocking an employee from doing something, which is not very helpful. Vast majority of time, users are not trying to steal all our stuff; they're trying to get work done. That instead of just saying no, you can't use this app, say no, you can't use this app, but we actually pay for enterprise cloud or something like that. So. No, you can't use ChatGPT, but you're probably not even going to notice the difference, with the sanctioned enterprise version that we have here. I remember first seeing that the idea that I think back in the CASB days, but the implementation there can get very complex, reverse proxies and things like that. I think a lot of it's API based now, but still, again, it just seems to simplify everything so much to do it right there in the browser.
Well, I'm glad you called something out there. And I've worked with CASB technologies in my career.
Yeah, Blue Coat, right?
Yes, right. Yeah, so there's a lot of non-uniformity in how you control. Like you think of the APIs. This SaaS provider's API is very rich. This one's immature. So you've got to build thousands of apps, the API frameworks, to be able to support all the things the org has. I mean, so that's not very palatable. But instead of looking at the back end, by the way, there's power in that. So there's power in. One of the things we can do is we can tie into the back-end APIs, but communicate to the end user when you've overly been permissive of a file, for example. So the user experience controlling that front end is important. But what's really cool about it is the ubiquity of control. So I don't care about the application. You go to any application, it is exactly the same control over this app, It doesn't differ. I don't lose fidelity over here in this app versus this one. It's the same exact level of control across the board. So when you build a policy the first time, you go, oh, cool. It works the exact same way over that app, and that app is that app. And that wasn't always true with my prior technologies that I work with as well.
Mm. And do those, for that to work, do those apps have to be onboarded or categorized, or for that policy to? Do you have to do some normalization across apps?
Well, fortunately, many orgs have already set up application entitlements for their single sign-on providers.
Okay.
And they've also done that sometimes in their virtualization environments. Think of things like Azure Virtual Desktop. They've created published apps.
Yeah.
The org with Citrix has done that for years as well.
Yep.
So they've already created many of these application entitlements. So one of the things we can do right out of the gate is, one of the first things we do is we tie into the single sign-on provider. And I'll just synchronize the entitlements. So at the end of the day, we leverage what's already there. And then sometimes there are apps that are not a part of the SSO environment. There's something unique, and you might create a custom entitlement for an audience of users, et cetera. But by and large, we want to use what you've already invested in.
Right. So here, where you're talking about privileged user account management, tell me about that a little bit, about what you're doing there.
Yeah, it's a really cool area, and in fact, there's a really interesting use case in that area that's arisen. I'd say the past 6 months, like kind of out of nowhere, and it's a really big one. Obviously you have people in the organization that you need to perform certain duties, and you want them to have credentials and be able to leverage those things. Think about contractors, like, or you're a healthcare provider, and you bring in someone to do maintenance on an MRI machine or something like that. You got to give them the credentials to the machine. And so now they know the credentials, and you want to keep those things a secret. There's obvious stuff like administrative work and things along those lines, maintenance work and things like that. But one that cropped up recently was social media. Explain a bit. A lot of your largest brands on the planet have a massive social media footprint.
Right.
So they've got their X accounts, they've got their XYZ accounts, whatever they may be, Instagram, et cetera. And the dilemma is it's a single account. And many people in the org that in social media they all share their credential. And then on top of that, you've got the outside PR firms, our friends that have probably brought us into this room here. But they we outsource sometimes PR and social media to some of those folks. So they got shared outside people and inside people. And they all know the credential. So there's nothing stopping one of those people from taking the credential, malicious act or activist act or whatever.
Or they lose it. They get an info stealer on it.
100%. There's a million different things that are problems with that. And you saw this in the news. If you just do a little homework or a little search on this, I won't call out the brands or anything, but you've seen several brands this past year where the social media accounts were hijacked.
Yeah.
And something non-friendly to the brand was posted. It's bad enough when it's something that's non-friendly to the brand. Think about material information being published.
Right.
Like if you're a financial services firm and all of a sudden you're about to make an acquisition and someone leaks part of it or leaks misinformation and things like that. So there's a lot of concern there. So privileged access management, to your point, when a user goes to a destination, the browser knows context. It's all contextually driven. That's one really important foundational part of it. The browser is aware of the identity of the user, the role of the user, the device they're on, the geolocation, et cetera. When the user goes to a social media app, for example, and they're in the social media team, the browser will go, wait a minute, you're in that team for that entitlement. It'll offer up the credential. You click a button and inject the credential. The user never gets they have no access to the credential. Okay. So it'll inject and it'll force them to log in. Now here's the best part. It forces them to log in through the enterprise browser. Second part is we have a full audit record now. So I can attribute every movement to the logged in user. I'll know that Braden Rogers is the one that made that post. And we may not have liked it, but we know who it was. Or if it's something malicious, we'll know exactly who it was. So.
Yeah, you otherwise wouldn't have been able to tie that to any of the 6 people who all have that same username and password.
100%.
Yeah, very interesting. And it's so you have some method of managing credentials within the solution as well. Is it like a full-blown password manager?
Yeah, we have both, two sides of the coin, I guess. Privileged access management, for the org to assert their own credentials. Yeah. And then we have a built-in password manager where the end users can be empowered, obviously, for password management natively in the browser. Now, obviously, being an enterprise browser, one thing that's important, we support all your common extensions. So if you want to bring your own password manager, great. If you've got some enterprise standard, but we built
very important.
Yeah, it is
for people's workflows.
100%. Yeah. But we built one natively into the browser as well. It inherits some things we won't have time to get into around self-protection, where the browser can protect itself, on an unmanaged device. And but there's some really cool things. You've got an EA, for example. You want to share you're an executive. You want to share your credentials for your travel sites. Yeah. I want them to know it, but you can share and let them invoke the credential, but not know the credential. Things like that.
Right. Yeah. They can input it, but they can't see it.
Correct.
Yeah. So if I recall correctly, I can't believe it's been 5 years already either.
Yeah, crazy, huh?
But yeah, it was a shock. Yeah, I think you came out of stealth. Island came out of stealth with over 200 million in funding, and I see you've raised another 250 million. So the question is, like what's next? What are you building with this? So clearly, like the initial amount, building a browser is no small task.
Right.
Yeah, you need some funding to be able, even building on top of Chromium. That's still a lot to do. This is not something that a few people in the SecOps team work where it can have a kind of a gritty interface or something like that. This is something where every employee is going to be using this. It's got to be polished. It's got to work well. Performance has to be good. User patience for bad apps is like I like to say you can spend $1 million on something. If it doesn't work, not your money. But as a consumer, anything facing a consumer or an employee, I spend $1 on an app. I expect it to be perfection, right?
Right.
Or even if it's free, right? There's this completely different level of expectation with it. So yeah, with this funding, where are we going from here? And maybe if you want to touch a little bit on anything you're announcing here at RSA.
Yeah, so we're very fortunate. We've got some great supporters from the financials community and some backers that have just been wonderful to us over the years. Mm-hmm. They believe in the journey like we do, and they've seen it in real life situations, obviously talking to people who are using it in production environments, getting their feedback of the value they get from it. So it's a big step for us, and the great part about what we've done now is we've got explosive customer growth. We've got to support those folks. Mm-hmm. Certainly building product takes engineers, so obviously the resources, we apply to hiring the right folks and continue to build out the development teams and product teams, et cetera. But also, supporting the customers that have deployed the product, starting to deploy, many are deploying globally, large footprints. So we got to support those folks. So having resources to do that, and then obviously expanding our global footprint because, North America is not the only place that people live, and our organizations we support don't just live in North America. So, the expansion of the footprint in places like Asia, we've already got a European footprint. So it takes resources, and that's exactly where we're applying it.
And just a little bit with your title, and then we'll wrap on this. Chief Customer Officer. Mm-hmm. So your focus is customer satisfaction, I imagine, is a big piece of it. Yeah.
I own anything that's technical that touches the customers. So the pre-sales teams, all the sales engineering teams, the customer success folks, support of the product, things like that. So I'm deep in the customers that are using it in live production environments today. So it's a lot of fun.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Braden, for joining me today. Great conversation. Learned a lot. And congrats again for being nominated as a Best Insider Threat Solution finalist in the 2025 SE Awards.
Thank you, Adrian, for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.